afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Expo 2020, and as we would like to say, حياكم. Today's conversation would be an eyes-up conversation about technology. But before we do that, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Iman Amrani. I am the Deputy Chief Technology Officer at Expo 2020. I am here as my role to provide as much as possible an eyes-up experience at the Expo 2020 site. We want to live our life full throttle. So how do we design technologies to better our lives? We are too engaged these days with our eyes down and on our mobile phones. So there's a very thin balance between what technology can provide us within a small rectangle over here, between a cinemascope view of an eyes-up experience. How do we balance or draw the line between technology and our daily lives? So amongst all the varied and excellent contributions, you have been amongst the few that were selected to engage in our conversation today. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Rohan Roberts, who is the Head of Future Learning at GEMS Education, and he's also the co-founder of Our Academy, or Our Academy. Our Academy. There we go.
Great.
Rohan, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, dear students, and welcome. I'm absolutely delighted to be moderating this brand new session of Expo 2020's Next Gen World Majlis. The focus is Eyes Up, navigating our new hyper-connected reality. Now, the convergence of a wide range of exponential technologies has meant that we're now living in an era of unprecedented upheaval and accelerating change. How are the boundaries between the real and the virtual dissolving? How are our relationships changing as a result of our connection with our devices? And what new skills will we need to develop in order to survive and thrive in this new hyper-connected reality? We now have the ability to connect with people, places, products, and ideas from any part of the world at the mere swipe of a screen. Now, all that's really exciting, but it can also be baffling and bewildering. And undoubtedly, there are causes for concern as well. I'd like to start by addressing something I hear from adults quite often. I hear from adults that young people are asocial or unsocial these days because they are so caught up with their devices. Would you agree as young adults that you are asocial, or would you say you are differently social? The floor is open.
I feel like that's a very popular misconception, that just because we have our phones, we're not being social, we're just on our phones, on our laptops all day. But it's not just that our world nowadays requires us to be online so often, it's also that our phone does provide us an opportunity to socialize. Our friends are not just in our neighborhoods, they're in different cities, different countries, different continents.
I feel that though there should be a balance, social media has allowed this generation specifically to connect in a vastly different form as previous generations, as was mentioned before. Before, people used to socialize within neighborhoods, within their schools, so they usually interacted with people of the same mindset. However, now this generation has, I feel personally, become much more open-minded, because through social media such as YouTube, Twitter, they're able to not only connect with people from their own neighborhoods, but from different cultures, different religions, and who are all able to discuss and debate their own personal views. And we're able to get a frame, we're able to see through the eyes of others.
It's not about technology, it's about how you use it. I believe that we should start drawing lines, because I think we're crossing a lot of borders that shouldn't be crossed. A lot of people are getting hurt, like bullying and cyber bullying have become very popular, and a lot of people are getting hurt. Like, of course, social media have helped a lot, and technology have helped a lot, and we've developed. But I think we should know how to balance, because I believe that it was aimed to socializing, but I think it has become a social illusion across a mobile screen, not really socializing, but like people are disconnected from like reality.
Transition now to a point that she just raised about mental health. What do you think social media and our addiction to smartphones and being on the Wi-Fi all the time is doing to the mental health of young people?
We tend to use social media, majority of people use social media in a way that is considered as wrong. They use it in things that are not helpful or not helpful. And due to that, they forget to show their emotions. And so we have a lack of communication skill in our daily life. And so to that, we find it awkward making new friends and all that.
I feel like a major thing that it's really good to bring up is technology and its relation with education. I mean, if we go just 20 years back, whiteboards were like the height of technology, right? Our parents were so surprised you have whiteboards in classes now. And now we have laptops in our schools, and we're using these to connect to a much larger database, the internet. So now, back in the day, if somebody wanted the atomic mass of a certain element, they'd have to, do all the work and open up a book or something. And now I'm so easily connected through my laptop to the wider web, and it's so much easier.
In terms of education, I personally think that there's many more ways that technology can push education further rather than behind. Comparatively to, for example, in my dad's generation, if he wanted to write an essay on, say, a war, he'd have to go to the library. He'd have to find encyclopedias, different sources. Now there are literally millions of sources just at the hands of at the top tips of our fingers. That you can search Google, you can find different papers written by different. You have so many different perspectives, so many different sources in terms of just articles online or full research papers done by experts, by professors.
We've been learning to code, we've been learning to do programs, we've been learning so much that we couldn't have done before. As Azra said, it helps us to speed up our research process. It helps to speed up everything. But when one depends on it too much, that it starts to erode the ability and starts to take away the discipline and the desire, then it might have to be toned down a bit, and you might have to gain another perspective on technology and how to be productive with it rather than just use it.
Yeah, I feel like the point's really true and correct, that technology is great for education and productivity, and we're very fortunate to have that, but not everyone around the world is fortunate enough to be able to access education on technology and the internet and things like that. So I feel like before we step into and try to focus on how to, make technology better, we must make sure that everyone has an equal chance of, using technology in education.
So I've been to many schools, all with the same access to the same gadgets, and how the schools utilize these technologies, they have the same smartboard, but what do they do with the smartboard? How do they make this smartboard actually serve the students? It's different. So we need to look at how we could make technology better serve humanity and better serve, not just in terms of education. We need to stop looking at technology as a tool. We should look at it as a resource, just as important as oil and electricity and water, for example. We need to make it a necessity in our life. And when it comes to setting a balance, we don't really need a balance. We just need sensible confinements.
Sticking on the idea of balance, a concern from a lot of adults, teachers, parents is students and young people are addicted to their devices. So I'd love to hear from you. How would you monitor yourself and ensure that you have balance in your lives and in the lives of your friends? Because I'm sure you'll admit that in some cases there is an overdependence on our devices and an addiction to the internet.
In regards to the technology usage, the screen time we get on a daily basis, the average active internet user uses about 2 hours and 22 minutes of social media and messaging communications in a day. It might not seem like much, but if you scale it out over a year, that's 35 days in a year lost. And so even though many occupations require you to use these messaging communications, we have to balance out and make sure that we don't spend too much time scrolling through your recommended feed and things like that.
So I think, of course, you can check your screen time and balance your time, but sometimes younger people, especially those who are born with technology, we were in the middle, kind of. We came before technology, kind of, and we developed with it. But those who are younger, they just witnessed technology. They were born afterwards, and they can't really balance themselves. So I think this is where the role comes for their parents and those who are adults, to actually give them the advices they need because they don't really know how to use it.
Well, a large part of this conversation has been how much time we spend on our phone. But let's say we didn't have our phones. Let's say we went back 20, 50 years. We would have our TVs. And I know from hearing stories that we would spend all that time on the TV instead. But we didn't have a TV. Radio. We would spend all that time on the radio. So why is it that we're targeting the phone and saying that all that time we're spending on it is so bad when we're not the first generation to do it? We're just the first generation to focus on the phone. And I'm an avid reader, so I know I easily spend at least 3 hours a day reading. But no one sees any fault in that because, oh, it's a book. But I'm using a book to read and distract myself from my homework. People use phones to, yes, also distract themselves, but to talk to people and socialize. So why do we keep targeting the phone as a bad thing? Yes, you spend 5 hours on it, but I spend 5 hours reading. And people would see me as a good thing.
Can we now transition to a really interesting point that I want to raise? We're now bathed in information, but how reliable is the information that we access? And how do you distinguish between information, misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda? What support are you getting from your teachers and parents when you navigate the sea of information online?
Every single piece of human creation has the ability to be disruptive. And of course, nowadays, information, the amount of it, has led us to be a little bit confused with which sources are reliable, which sources aren't. Is this source trying to sway me in a direction, or is this source trying to inform me about a certain thing? And this really does bring up the human aspect of everything. We as individuals, especially as young people with our own thought processes, our own political ideas, we need to learn to differentiate between these two sources. Now, how we go about differentiating these two sources really depends on personal aspect. So personally, I only use .un or .org sites to validate all of my information. But it really just depends. It's a personal choice. Similarly, how one uses technology is all completely personal.
So even on Twitter, for example, it depends on which people you follow, which mutuals you have. And it depends on, for example, if you use Snapchat, it's a different experience as using Instagram, or using Google, it's a different experience as using Bing. So it depends on your personal choices. Your personal preferences, they actually really have an influence on the kind of information you're getting.
I personally believe that a big part of today's society and getting the news is cross-referencing. That today, many people, whenever they're getting their news, before you might have gotten it from one source, one news source that you trust. Maybe it was the CNN, the New York Times. Now this generation, I think it's become a habit, especially when you're doing research papers, and that translates from doing research in education to doing research in just your personal life. You'll want to see different perspectives from different news sources. You want to see when you're trying to find who has the facts right, instead of going to one place, you're saying, okay, what is the general consensus that every single person is saying? Is every single news source saying that, 500 people were affected by this? And then there will be one outlier that's saying that, only 90 were. So you'll tend to side with the general source, that the majority who all agree on one thing will tend to be considered the correct party.
So when you say that it's the majority of the news sources are reporting this and there's only one outlier, but what if that one outlier is the actual one? What if the media was only focusing on that one thing that they wanted you to believe?
In my school, personally, we did a UNICEF program, so we have it every year as a CCA, and I signed up. And my group, we focused on fake news. So what we ended up doing was we used Python and such programs to create a program that cross-references websites for us to determine if they're fake, real, or just misinformation.
Regarding actions, we had a workshop a couple of years ago, I think. That's when I started checking whether news are right or wrong. The person responsible gave us a tweet and asked us what we think about it. And we all believed it was right and discussed why did this happen and what is going on. And then she said, go search this tweet online. Dozens and dozens of websites had this tweet, but in real life, no official website said that this thing is happening.
Right.
So I think after that workshop, I started checking every news coming to me.
We have tools that help teachers check for plagiarism. We need to develop tools that help us determine what is fake news and what is real. And I feel like that wouldn't even be like something difficult to find. Because a couple of years back, no one would have imagined that a simple tool will tell you the exact percentage that an essay was plagiarized on.
Most governments are not able to distinguish between deepfakes and actual videos because technology has evolved that we can't distinguish that anymore. It's almost like it's the real thing. So even if you're not like me and you actually do check for everything, you can still make sure that what you're seeing is true.
But sometimes, like, simply, we should just use human logic. Unfortunately, with technology, we just believe everything we see, even if it's unrealistic. And that's why I think that we should just lay down and think it through before posting about it. Of course, we should use our minds before using the technology.
Who should oversee our presence on social media and online? Is it the government? Is it parents, teachers, schools, ourselves?
It should be a multi-step, multi-sector thing. So it should start from individuals, then move on to developers, to parents, to developers, and then eventually to governments. And this way we could actually regulate what information is really useful and which information is not. And I feel like that's the most feasible approach.
Coming back to what Ali said, that to regulate what is useful information and what's not useful. But at the end of the day, who chooses what is useful and what is not? At the end of the day, there's the whole argument of freedom of speech, freedom of choice. So who would, if we took it up to the government, what would the government be choosing? What is useful information and what is not? And by that logic, who decides what ideas are right and wrong? And who has the right to even say which ideas are right and wrong?
You just mentioned influencers. And sometimes they draw a picture for your children to become something they are not. We start believing that we are wrong and we should look in a way and we should act in a way. So that goes back to your mental health. So I believe that parents and school and teachers, they all should be aware of what you're using because you need to help them. They're not aware of what they're doing. They're just trying to adapt with the people around. And sometimes it just you become someone you're not.
In the UAE, we actually regulate half the internet. Yeah. But because the government, when we're speaking about the government, we're looking at experts. Experts that know what information could be harmful towards its citizens and what information could compromise the UAE's position or like the UAE's general reputation. So that's why it's important for the government to regulate the internet.
I mean, absolutely power corrupts, absolutely. Technology similarly follows the same pattern. We must maintain a balance, but technology does have the ability to do good.
I think that we should always remember that carrying a smartphone shouldn't make us lose our own intelligence. So it goes back to your own conscious. At the end, you should ask yourself: Are you a good citizen? Are you doing a change? And is it in the right way? Is it in the right path?
I feel like when we talk about technology, we mostly focus on phones and social media. We often overlook the fact that technology could be the greatest solution for one of the global problems, such as deforestation and worldwide epidemics and things like that.
I feel like technology should also teach us to be a bit more empathetic so that we're able to understand others' perspectives.
We should use technology as a resource. And when we start using it as a resource, we're going to be able to utilize it and integrate it into our lives in many beneficial ways. However, we shouldn't let technology completely take us over, like the oil phenomenon, where eventually at a certain time, nothing could function without oil. And we don't want to reach a stage where society is not going to be able to function without technology. So that's where we have to draw the line.
Honestly, I think I have been inspired by each one of you here today. I think you're all empowered to use technology the right way. And I also feel that if any one of you are planning on pursuing their careers in technology, you will be using the technology for good. Thank you very much. It has been inspirational. Thank you.